Today, we will talk about what cost and freight, CFR, is in foreign trade contracts. Cost and freight is a legal term used in foreign trade contracts. In a contract specifying that a sale is cost and freight, the seller is required to arrange for the carriage of goods by sea to a port of destination and provide the buyer with the documents necessary to obtain them from the carrier. With a cost and freight sale, the seller is not responsible for procuring marine insurance against the risk of loss or damage to the cargo during transit. Contracts involving international transportation often contain abbreviated trade terms that describe matters such as the time and place of delivery, payment, the conditions under which the risk of loss shifts from the seller to the buyer, and specifying the party responsible for the costs of freight and insurance. If a buyer and a seller agree to include cost and freight in their transaction, the seller must arrange and pay for transporting the cargo to a specified port. The seller must deliver the goods, clear them for export, and load them onto the transport ship. For goods transported internationally by sea or inland waterways, there are three other Incoterms that are closely related to CFR and are frequently used in trade contracts. Cost and freight is an expense associated with cargo transported by sea or inland waterways. If CFR is included in a transaction, the seller must arrange and pay for transporting the cargo to a specified port. The seller is also responsible for delivering the goods, clearing them for export, and loading them onto the transport ship. However, once the shipment is loaded into the vessel, the risk of loss or damage falls to the buyer. This means that the seller is not responsible for insuring the cargo during transportation. Incoterm is short for International Commercial Term, a set of terms and definitions published by the International Chamber of Commerce. These terms are standardized to prevent confusion and clarify the obligations of buyers and sellers, such as transport and export clearance obligations. Cost and freight and cost insurance and freight, CIF, are similar. They both relate to transporting goods by sea and divide the responsibilities of transit between the buyer and the seller. Where they differ is that CIF requires marine insurance to be included, at the expense of the seller. With CFR, the seller is not responsible for insuring the goods until they reach the destination port. Cost and freight, an Incoterms rule that's applicable only to cargo transported by sea or inland waterways, puts a fair bit of responsibility on the shoulders of both the buyer and the seller. Under these agreements, which are fairly common in international trade, the seller is responsible for all the planning and costs associated with exporting goods by sea to the destination port specified by the recipient. However, as soon as the goods are loaded on the vessel, the buyer is responsible for providing marine insurance on them, and for transporting the goods via truck to their final destination, import fees, and so on. Here are three key takeaways. 1. Cost and freight is a legal term specifying that sellers are required to transport goods by sea to a port of destination and provide the buyer with the documents necessary to pick up the goods at the destination. 2. If a buyer and a seller agree to include cost and freight in their transaction, this provision means that the seller is not responsible for securing insurance for the cargo for loss or damage during transportation. 3. Cost and freight is a commonly used international commercial term, Incoterm, a set of globally recognized terms that help to create a standard for foreign trade contracts and are published and regularly updated by the International Chamber of Commerce, ICC. Hope this would help. Thanks for watching.